It's time to turn your life-challenging moments into life-changing messages. Welcome to the Power Lift Stories podcast, where we are interviewing women whose stories will leave you lifted up, fired up, and fueled up with hope, courage, and inspiration. We want to thank our sponsor, Powerful Journey, who helps women tell their stories, write their books, and building a profitable brand around both. Join the masterclass or the Speakers Academy at phyllisjenkins.com. That is PhyllisJenkins.com. Now here's your host, Phyllis Jenkins.
I believe that you can turn your life challenges into a life-changing message, a message of hope, inspiration, and encouragement. And that's exactly what we have today, a life-changing message that will leave you lifted up. Welcome today, Nance Schick. And I am going to briefly introduce Nancy and then have her add a little bit more to it. Nancy and I recently met and have become friends through the Dan Miller 48 Days Eagles community, where we have now become supporters of each other and cheering each other on. Nancy is also an employment attorney, a mediator, and a diversity trainer based out of New York City. She is also an author, I will say that as well. Nancy helps freelancers, risk managers, and micro businesses resolve workplace conflict so that everyone has a pleasant work experience. Is that not great? That is certainly what we all want. Nancy, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Phyllis. You know I love being with you. And I noticed before we started by accident, I just chose purple because I like it. And here we are doing the purple thing today. So we're putting each other at ease, showing our sisterhood a little bit.
Doing the purple thing, exactly, the sisterhood. Now, that was just a beginning to your introduction. Would you go on and share a little bit more about where you were born and raised, and then whatever else you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, and my dad was not the most responsible parent, I guess we could say. He wasn't the ideal parent for me and any of my sisters. So I was, I basically, as early as I can remember, I was being raised by a single mom, right? And then eventually my dad, according to my mom, I don't remember any of this, but the police came looking for my dad in the middle of the night. That was back in the 70s when you could do that. The police could come in the middle of the night to the house and take someone out. And my mom didn't know at that point what to do. And it wasn't the first thing, right, in the series. And she struggled. So she went to her priest, and my dad was struggling so much with alcoholism and lying and cheating and stealing that the priest told my mom that she should get a divorce because my dad was going to be the role model for us. And we had a better chance without him in the house than if she tried to do this on her own. And she didn't do it on her own, right? We never do anything on our own. So she did it with her faith and the church and her family and her friends. And I had a community of people around me. Not always, there were definitely things that went on. I had a family member who abused me. Then later I was molested by one of that family member's friends. Just kind of started a path of when I go now and speak to criminal justice students, right? I'll go and speak to the criminology students. They like hearing my story because I'm what they call a repeat victim. And we tend to think about repeat victim in the context of someone who's been repeatedly victimized and abused over and over by the same person. But I like to tell my story, and they like to have me come in and tell the story, because we now know that that unresolved trauma can set us on the path of continuing to put ourselves in situations where we're victimized over and over again. And that's kind of what happened to me throughout my life until I was assaulted on the Sunday before Martin Luther King Day in 2014. I was on my way home, oddly, from a conference where I was learning to be better at communication in different communities and bring more people together, and was violently assaulted on my way home from it. Wow. And it was at that point that I got myself in counseling and realized that I had this long history of putting myself in situations to be victimized. Now, I'm not blaming myself for being assaulted. And I still reject people who say, oh, well, you should have done this, you should have done that, you shouldn't have been out walking by yourself, you're a woman, right? All of that, that's not the issue.
Right.
The issue is, when I was in the counseling, I realized I didn't have a lot of awareness of my own value and didn't stand for it, because I had a long history of kind of having the world tell me that I wasn't worth much, and I believed it.
Wow. And I just want to interject right now for that woman that's listening, who is believing that lie about yourself, that you're not worth it. You indeed are worth it. And as Nancy continues to share her story today, you will see how God has allowed her to become a champion of her life challenges. And so, Nancy, first of all, I want to applaud you for getting help, and say to anyone listening today that it's okay to reach out and get help. That's what the counselors are there for. And as you continue to hear Nancy's story today, you'll see that it helps you to be able to move forward and to do the things that you have been created to do. So, Nancy, if you were to give your life challenging story a title, what would that story be, and why?
And listen carefully when I say it, because it could sound like something different than the way it comes out. But I would probably call it Schick, as in Schick, my last name, because I think it's a funny play on words. And it does sound like something else that we might say when bad things happen to us. But I like finding the humor in it. Of course, and I warned you this in advance, I may cry. I've had a lot of trauma in my life, but I also have had a lot of joy, a lot of laughter, and a lot of good things in my life. And I think you and I've talked about this over and over again, about when we ground ourselves in that gratitude, including for the things that maybe weren't so pleasant. I've, in preparation for coming to be with you today, I started thinking about being grateful for things that maybe weren't pleasant.
Wow.
Not necessarily that, yes, I want to be assaulted again, right? Because I don't. I never want to be assaulted or raped again, and I don't want other people to have to go through it. Right. But I can be thankful for the outcome of it. I can be thankful for all I learned, right? Wow. Yeah. And that is something that I continue to do, is ground myself in that. And when I change my focus in that way, it opens more of that. When I was in my dark place where I was feeling like a victim all the time, it didn't inspire me. It didn't empower me to take action to do anything new. I did little things, but I expected the quick fix. And what I've learned in the course of my now 52 years, right, is that It's those little things that we do. It's those commitments. It is the gratitude, stopping in the moment that you realize you're having a bad moment, right? And just you're frustrated and go, look around me. What can I find to be grateful for? I can be grateful right now for the sun that's kind of giving me a weird cast on my face, right? In this video, but I'm like, I have sunshine right there.
Exactly.
And it's beautiful sky.
I love that message. Stop where you are right now. If you are battling something, if you are going through a frustrated moment, stop and look around, as Nancy just said, and see what there is to be grateful for, and focus on that thing at the moment. Nancy, how great is that?
And it doesn't mean the other things are going to go away.
Right.
But that's the other part of it, is they don't just disappear. Like there are certain things we can take action on and we can change in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't stop the pandemic. I can't stop, climate change. I can do my part in some of these things. I can't stop people from hurting each other. I can do my part. And so it's about, looking at what can I do? And one of the first things I can do is put myself on a better path by finding that gratitude and remembering that there's always something to be grateful for.
Always, always. That's great. As you continue to share your story, I would like to have you transition into the work that you're doing now. But if you would finish your story, and then we'll discuss what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I guess to kind of fast forward, a lot of people ask what happened to the young man that assaulted me, right? So, I talk about it in my book. So if you want to hear the whole story or you want to read the whole story, there's plenty of content out there where you can get the whole story.
What's the title? What's the title of your book?
The title of my book is DIY Conflict Resolution. And what I do in that book is I take mediation techniques and I use them for you to apply in pretty much any kind of conflict. So often, we're disconnected. So first you make 7 choices to get you connected to where you are, kind of help you delve into some of the feelings and release some of them, especially if you're in conflict with another person. Getting that clear before you engage with the other person will make the conversation go more smoothly, right?
Yes.
Because so often we end up in that very inflamed conversation, and it's completely okay to say, wow, I realize that I'm not in the best place right now. Mm-hmm. And I want to calm down so we can have a productive conversation. And that's kind of what the book will help you do. And then it'll help you get clear on what it is you want so that you can focus your energy in those conversations and your actions on getting the outcome you want.
That's great. And at the end of our interview, I will have you to let our listeners know where they can purchase your book.
Okay. Thank you. And so go fast forward then. The young man, it turned out, in the evening that I was being assaulted in the dark with someone with a hood over his head, I couldn't see that it was a boy. I saw that for the first time pretty much when I got to the police station. And I got a good look at him. They bring him in after I came in and was giving my statement. And when I heard them talking about him, who they were about to bring in. And then when I watched him and when they said 14 years old.
Wow.
14 years old. And I said, here it was after 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. And it turned out I'm in New York City, and this was a young man from Newark. So he had been across the river in the city on a Sunday night. And I said, something's going on in this kid's life. And I'm not here to judge or blame parents or anything like that. That's not my role. My role is not to be the judge, right?
Right. Yeah.
My role is to find my compassion and where I can contribute, right? And so I stood for him to get restorative justice, which is also kind of a mediation type technique where we bring the same kinds of conversations to tailor the resolution. Right. And so that was where I was standing for him to get the services around him that he needed to have a different life. And instead, he and his family fled the sentencing and disappeared for about 18 months. That's part of that's one of the most heartbreaking parts of it, is that when you stand for someone and they don't stand for themselves. And he ultimately, during that time, he was unfindable, right? Commit about 11 more crimes. And so by the time his sentencing came back around, he went to jail. He was 16 at the time, and that was the path his life went. Now, I don't know what happened to him. I may never find out, but maybe someday he'll find this video even, and I'll say, I hope you got something.
Wow.
From me standing for you, and I hope you've started to stand for yourself to have more.
The compassion that you have is just amazing. And I'm sure that someone listening today needed to hear that. Maybe you're not a victim of rape or an assault, but you're having an issue with forgiving someone for hurting you. And Nance has forgiven this young man and even stood for him to be able to get help. So you're not hearing this today by accident. God is allowing you to hear Nancy's story so that you can take the pieces from it that applies to you and the lessons that she is teaching to be able to help you to move forward. And forgiveness is always, always in order. So Nancy, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I know this part of the story, but they don't, as far as when you went on your first interview, I believe it was, in New York City. Talk about that for a moment, please.
Oh, that's another one. You know, it went in my list of traumas. It was more of a trauma that I didn't experience firsthand necessarily. But my first interview, you can't see my degree, the date on it, but I graduated in May of 2001 from law school. So took the bar in, I think, July, and then came down here. My first interview in New York City was at 9 a.m. on 9/11. I was fortunate, talk about God looking over me. I do not really understand sometimes why he keeps plucking me back out of these situations, but he does. And so I feel, a responsibility to do something with that. But I was on Long Island that morning, and I had changed my mind kind of at the last minute where I was going to stay, because I started to think, I'm going to be really nervous. It's 9 a.m. traffic. It's New York City. I had driven something I don't really do anymore because I don't need a car here, but it's a whole different world. But I thought all that through, being the preparer that I am. And so I changed my mind and decided to stay really close to where I was interviewing. And that's what kept me from being in the city that morning.
Wow.
So yeah, and talk about also just some of the miracles that occurred around that day. I had a cousin who had driven up with me who'd never been to Long Island, so she wanted to come with me and help with the driving. I'm so glad I wasn't alone that day, because if you remember, everything was cut off. People were trying to reach me. I couldn't reach my mom. I couldn't reach my best friend. I've heard my best friend at that point in my life, who's been my friend since I was 12. We've been like this, for years. And I had at that point heard her sob twice. And the second time was when she couldn't reach me on 9/11.
Wow.
And that's the day I became a New Yorker.
What an amazing story. And I see that God's hand was certainly on you and protecting you, so that you could be here to continue to share your story. And as we begin to wrap up, I want to ask this last question before we go into your book and your business. but I want you to imagine that you just stood on a stage. You're in New York, so I'll say a Broadway stage. You just stood on a Broadway stage.
Just don't make me dance or sing.
And you shared your story. The theater was filled with women. And as you shared your story, you could see many of them sitting and to the edge of their seat, leaning in. You could see others, Nancy, that were wiping tears because somehow they could relate to what you were sharing. But now you shared your story. They stood, gave you a standing ovation, and they are now leaving to return to their homes. The curtains close. Nancy is turning to go to her vehicle. What are 3 lessons that you hope every woman would walk away with?
Well, I'm going to start with the one that I often will bring to the closing when I'm speaking. Is it's the Japanese proverb: fall down 7 times, get up 8. Right. And I know that people go, how is that possible? Right. It's like, well, you're up once or else you wouldn't be able to fall. Right. So the math actually does work, but it's just pointing to the only thing that's left for us to do when we've gotten knocked down is lift back up, which brings me to 2. Sometimes you don't always know how to do that yourself. And it doesn't matter what little step you make, reach out, let someone help you, especially when you're in your weak moments. But also the third part of that is allow people to help you without doing it for you. Right?
Wow.
I think that's so important because, we try very hard to help each other. And then we go into kind of fixer mode, right? And so I guess I'm kind of giving you a 4th lesson here is that when you go into fixer mode with a human being, the only thing you can leave them with, no matter how well intended it is the experience of being broken. And we're not broken.
That's good. That's good. Great lessons. Learned. And Nancy, you're doing some great things there in New York City. Share with our listeners what you're doing, how they can connect with you, and how they can connect with your works and grab your book as well.
So you can grab the book on Amazon. Now there are 2 different editions. Just I'll note that we've re-released the 3rd edition. And so the 1st edition and the 3rd edition are both on Amazon. You'll want to look for the 3rd edition. That's the only place that one's being sold, and it's pretty easy to recognize it. I should have thought to bring it so I could show you, but it's pretty easy to recognize because it's got a black chair with a red toolbox in it, right? And that's what this book is about. It's about giving you the tools that you need to move through conflict. What I'm working on currently, because I work with so many freelancers and not necessarily in the holistic way that you might think of it, because I am a holistic attorney. But what I've been working with people a lot this year on, because of things like PPP and EIDL for small businesses and the pandemic assistance, is a lot of data got collected from the government agencies, and they're matching them all up, and they're finding that a lot of workers have been misclassified. So I've been helping freelancers and micro businesses get that right so that they don't get penalties. And when I say penalties, here in New York, if you, for example, don't have workers' compensation, disability, and paid family leave insurance for your employees, the penalties accumulate at a rate of $2,000 for every 10-day period that you don't have insurance. So I created a discount code for any of you out there that are listening through January 31st of 2022. If you're a listener to this podcast or viewing it, and you put in the PL, I did it as powerful lift, right? So PL 121521, which is today's date that we're recording this. You put that in and you're going to get that with a consultation with me. So you'll go through the course and you'll get a 1-hour consultation with me.
Thank you. That's great. And I will have that code in the show notes below, just in case you did not get that. But Nancy, thank you. That is so kind of you.
And I just want to note, it's not free, but I am giving you a 30% discount on it.
Yeah, that's still, we love discounts. So that's great. That's great. Is there anything else that you would like to leave with our listeners today?
Well, one is we're recording this on December 15th. So I have to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yes.
And let's really, together, let's make 2022 our best year yet, knowing that the best is still yet to come. Always.
I love that. And yes, to each of you from the Powerful Journey family, we wish you a very Merry Christmas as well. This will be our last recording until after Christmas. So Christmas blessings to you and your family. And remember, your story matters. Make sure that you tell your story, because no one else can tell it the way you can. Go and make it a great day. Thank you for joining us today. Nancy, thank you for being here with us. And God bless you and the great works that you are doing to help others.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. If you are interested in being on the show, go to phyllisjenkins.com. You can also sign up for the Powerful Journey Masterclass or the Speakers Academy at phyllisjenkins.com.